The relentless drizzle of a Seattle morning danced across the glass panels of the Braddock Tower, painting the city in hues of gray and silver. High above the street, nestled among steel and cloud, a young woman clutched a worn leather portfolio tightly to her chest. Her name was Leila Monroe, and this morning felt heavier than most. Raindrops clung to the loose strands of her auburn hair, slipping past her cheeks despite her best efforts with the curling iron earlier. The sleek ponytail she'd carefully crafted that morning had long since surrendered to the damp air. Her oversized cardigan hung on her petite frame like a shield, as though she could hide behind its softness, away from the sharp edges of the corporate world. At 26, Leila bore a quiet beauty-clear hazel eyes, delicate freckles, and an air of sincerity that made her seem both older and younger than her years. But she didn't flaunt it. Quite the opposite. The weight of her shyness, her deep-rooted humility, made her almost invisible in a city that thrived on boldness. She had moved from the small town of Ashland, Oregon, just under a year ago, landing a job at Brightage Communications, a mid-sized but rapidly growing marketing firm, had been her biggest triumph, though she rarely saw it that way. For Leila, every day felt like a test. She was still adjusting to the rhythm of Seattle's unyielding pace, and though she often missed the quiet stillness of home, she knew she was here for a reason. Her parents had sacrificed so much. Her father's health was fading, her mother worked nights at the diner, and Leila had promised herself that she would build something better for them and for herself. This morning, that promise weighed on her shoulders more than usual. She stared at her watch, heart ticking as fast as the seconds. Her presentation was in exactly 22 minutes. She had spent weeks preparing for this pitch, a new strategy for a tech startup hoping to break into the market with bold, community-driven branding. This was her chance to prove herself. But now, her fingers trembled as they flipped through the notes she had already memorized 100 times. The elevator dinged. Leila stepped back instinctively, startled out of her spiraling thoughts. The brushed steel door slid open, revealing a tall man inside. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit and stood with effortless confidence, one hand holding a phone, the other tucked casually in his coat pocket. His dark hair was slightly tousled, but still managed to look deliberate. His presence filled the elevator, not with arrogance but calm. As he looked up from his screen, their eyes met. His were the deepest shade of blue, sharp, intelligent, and surprisingly kind. Leila froze. "Going up?" he asked, voice low and warm, with a small, polite smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Why, yes, 15th floor," she replied, barely louder than a whisper. She quickly stepped in and pressed the button, positioning herself as far from him as possible. The elevator doors closed, and suddenly the small space felt like it had swallowed all the oxygen. She focused on her portfolio like it was a life preserver. The faint scent of his cologne drifted toward her woodsy, expensive, and subtly intoxicating. It was a scent that spoke of boardrooms and private jets, of calm authority and wealth. Leila swallowed hard. He glanced sideways at her. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," he said, not unkindly. His voice had a soft lilt to it, almost amused, but genuinely curious. She blinked. "Excuse me, big meeting?" he asked, nodding toward the white-knuckle grip she had on her folder. She exhaled shakily, caught off guard by his perception. "Presentation," she admitted. "Something for a startup. Just a proposal." His eyes softened. "First time presenting?" She gave a sheepish nod. "Is it that obvious?" He chuckled low, smooth, comforting. "You remind me of myself during my first pitch. I was so nervous I nearly passed out in front of 30 people. That made her laugh, despite herself. Really, I forgot how to breathe. Literally, someone thought I was choking." He grinned, and Leila found her tension easing, just a bit. "Well, that definitely makes me feel better," she admitted. "Thank you. What kind of proposal?" he asked. "Marketing strategy. For a tech company, they're looking for something fresh, something that cuts through the noise. I have ideas, but they're different. A little risky, maybe." "Different is good," he said, turning toward her slightly. Safe ideas rarely change anything. She studied him for a moment. There was something unusual about the way he listened. He didn't just wait for his turn to speak, actually heard her. That was rare and strangely comforting. The elevator paused briefly on the 10th floor. Leela glanced at him, expecting him to exit, but he didn't move. She cleared her throat. Do you work in marketing? He tilted his head thoughtfully. You could say I work with innovative companies. I like seeing what fresh minds come up with. There was something evasive in his tone, but not dishonest. More like he was used to hiding in plain sight. Leela nodded, surprised by her own boldness. I moved here from Oregon. Sometimes I feel like this city is too much, too fast, but I'm trying. He smiled again, softer this time. The best pearls are formed under pressure. She blinked, taken aback by the poetic phrasing. People from small towns, he continued, often bring the kind of authenticity you can't teach. That's rare and valuable. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Who was this man? What kind of stranger says things like that? Not in the cheesy, flirtatious way some men did, but with real sincerity. The elevator finally reached the 15th floor. The chime echoed softly in the silence. Leela hesitated before stepping out. She didn't want the moment to end. Good luck with your presentation, he said, and his voice was genuine. Trust your instincts. Sometimes the best ideas are the ones you're most afraid to share. Thank you, she said, turning toward him, heart fluttering. I hope your day goes well too. As the doors began to slide shut, he called out, maybe we'll run into each other again. She stared at the closed doors for a second too long, warmth blooming in her chest. Something about him had shifted the entire tone of her morning, and without even knowing his name, he had made her feel like she was capable of something great. She walked into Brightedge's offices with more spring in her step than she'd felt in weeks. The stranger's words echoed in her mind. Trust your instincts. And for the first time since she had started this job, Leela felt like she just might. The 15th floor buzzed with low voices, hurried footsteps, and the soft tapping of fingers on keyboards. But for Leela Monroe, the world had momentarily stilled. She sat at the edge of the long walnut conference table in the client meeting room, her notes spread neatly in front of her, her fingers resting calmly on the cover of her portfolio. Calm was something she rarely felt before a big presentation, but today was different. The stranger's voice from the elevator still echoed in her thoughts, his words like anchors holding her steady. Trust your instincts. Unconventional ideas are sometimes exactly what they need. And so, when she stood up to speak in front of the four-seated clients and her notoriously no-nonsense boss, Andrew Kessler, she didn't waver. She began with a story, not a slide. She pitched connection before numbers. She outlined her idea for a marketing campaign built around real people, grassroots storytelling, and authentic engagement rather than polished slogans and high-gloss commercials. She expected raised brows and skeptical glances. Instead, she saw heads nodding, eyes lighting up. By the time she finished, one of the clients, a lean man in a navy suit and wire-rimmed glasses, clapped softly and said, "That's exactly the kind of thinking we've been looking for." Andrew, who rarely handed out compliments, actually gave her a tight smile as they walked out of the room. "That was bold, Monroe," he said. "Keep thinking like that." Leela blinked at him. That was practically a standing ovation coming from Kessler. Back at her desk, still glowing from the success, her colleague Maya leaned over the divider separating their cubicles. "Okay, spill." Leela blinked. "Spill what?" Maya grinned knowingly. "Where did you get all that confidence from? You were on fire in there. You looked like you actually believed in your own genius for once." Leela chuckled. "I don't know. I guess I had a little encouragement." Maya raised an eyebrow. "From who?" Leela hesitated. "Just someone I met this morning in the elevator." Maya's eyes lit up. "Ooh, a hot elevator man." Leela turned slightly pink. "He was just kind. We talked for a few minutes. That's all. That's all it takes," Maya said, winking before turning back to her inbox. If this mystery man has any more encouragement to give, I highly suggest you take it. That night, Leela sat cross-legged on the floor of the small apartment she shared with her best friend and roommate, Nina Castello. Chinese takeout boxes surrounded them, lo mein, dumplings, and fried risi as the rain continued to tick against the window pane. So, Nina said through a mouthful of shrimp dumpling, "Tell me about Elevator Man." Leela hesitated. "I don't even know his name," she confessed. "He was just there, tall, polished, definitely expensive taste, but not arrogant. He listened. He actually cared about what I said. It was the weirdest thing. I didn't feel nervous with him." Nina, a journalist at the Seattle Daily Chronicle, narrowed her eyes and reached for her laptop. "Describe him again." Leela raised an eyebrow. "You're not serious." "I am absolutely serious," Nina said, already typing. "Executive floors, charcoal suit. Makes you feel like your ideas matter? That's not your average elevator ride, babe. That's a CEO in disguise." Leila laughed. "Come on, Nina. He could have been anyone. Maybe a client. Maybe someone visiting." Nina spun the screen round. "Or maybe he's Caleb Thorne." Leila blinked. On the screen was a recent article titled "The Quiet Rise of Caleb Thorne, Tech's Reluctant Young Billionaire." The photo showed the same sharp jawline, the same piercing blue eyes. It was him. "He's the founder of Thorne Innovations," Nina said, scrolling through more photos. "One of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. His company's into cybersecurity and digital infrastructure. Apparently, he's super reclusive. Hates the spotlight. But you said your guy was headed above floor 15. That's where the Thorne executive suite is." Leela stared at the screen, heart racing. "I didn't know. I mean, he never said who he was." "That's because he didn't want you to know," Nina said, pointing with her chopsticks. "People act weird when they know someone's rich. But he wanted to see who you were without the money filter." Leela slowly put down her food, her appetite vanishing. "So, what now?" she whispered. Nina smirked. "Now, you hope like hell that he liked talking to you as much as you liked talking to him. Because that guy, he could have taken a private elevator, but he didn't. He chose yours." Over the next few days, Leela found herself lingering in the lobby of the Braddock Tower a few minutes longer each morning, heart beating fast every time the elevator doors slid open. She started taking her lunch breaks at the tiny cafe in the building's mezzanine, hoping to spot the familiar face among the espresso-sipping executives and tech engineers. Nina teased her mercilessly. "You're officially smitten," she declared one evening. "I haven't seen you this worked up since they discontinued that peppermint mocha face mask you loved." "It's not like that," Leela insisted, though her cheeks said otherwise. "It's just, he made me feel like I wasn't invisible." Nina softened. "That's rare, especially from someone in his world." Leela nodded. "He said authenticity was valuable, that people from small towns have something special." "Well," Nina said, leaning back with a knowing smile, "maybe this city is finally starting to see what I've known all along." Nearly a week later, it happened. Leela had stayed late at the office, fine-tuning a proposal, the last few employees shuffling out for the night. She stepped into the elevator, exhausted, hair tied up in a loose bun, cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows. The doors began to close. In a hand, they slid open again, and there he was, dressed casually, this time dark jeans, a navy pullover, and a soft expression that made her knees wobble. "Caleb, hey," he said, a slow grin forming. "Presentation lady." Lila's smile bloomed without hesitation. "It went great," she said. "Actually, better than I ever hoped." "Congratulations," he replied, stepping inside. "I knew you had it in you." They rode in comfortable silence for a few seconds before he glanced at her again. "Would you be open to grabbing a coffee sometime?" he asked, voice quieter now. "I'd love to hear more about your marketing ideas." Lila's heart stopped, and then resumed at triple the speed. "I'd like that," she said, trying not to sound too breathless. He reached into his jacket and handed her a card. She took it, glancing down, and froze. "Caleb Thorne, Chief Executive Officer, Thorne Innovations." The elevator slowed to a halt. Leela looked up, her world tilting slightly. "You're Caleb Thorne," she whispered. He nodded gently, studying her expression. "Does that change things?" She looked at the car again. All the puzzle pieces slid into place. The calm authority, the quiet confidence, the tailored suit, the encouragement, the way he listened. It was him all along. "I don't understand," she said. "Why didn't you just say who you were?" He hesitated, then replied, "Because I wanted you to see me as just a person. Most people see the title, the company, the money, but you spoke to me like a human being. That meant more than you realize." Leela stared at him, heart in her throat. The man who had calmed her nerves, who had listened, who had believed in her when she wasn't sure she believed in herself. He was real, and he was standing in front of her, eyes full of hope. "Coffee sounds wonderful," she said at last, surprising them both with the firmness in her voice. His smile lit up the entire elevator. "Tomorrow at 7, he asked. "There's a little place I know where we can talk without any interruptions." She nodded. As she stepped into the cool evening air, Leela realized something astonishing. This wasn't just the start of a coffee date. It was the beginning of something she had never dared to imagine. The next morning, the city stirred to life beneath a hazy Seattle sky, its light drizzle misting over the streets like a memory barely remembered. Leela Monroe stood in front of her mirror, clutching a second outfit with mild panic. It was already the third one she'd tried on that morning. "This is ridiculous," she whispered to herself. "It's just coffee. It's just a man." But of course, it wasn't just a man. It was Caleb Thorntek, visionary, billionaire CEO, and, more importantly, the stranger in the elevator who had looked past her quiet nerves and seen something she hadn't even fully recognized in herself. And now, they were going to sit down across a table and talk like two people who actually might be on the brink of something real. Leela finally settled on a soft blue dress Nina had once insisted brought out her eyes. It was modest, simple, and comfortable. There were things she needed desperately. When she arrived 5 minutes early at the small cafe tucked away in a quiet Capitol Hill corner, her nerves buzzed like bees in her chest. The cafe itself was charming: exposed brick walls, vintage mismatched chairs, and a counter adorned with glass jars of homemade biscotti and tiny potted succulents. Everything about it felt cozy and unpretentious. And there, already seated at a corner table beneath the soft glow of a hanging Edison bulb, was Caleb. He wore a slate gray sweater over a white t-shirt and dark jeans, his hair tousled in that perfectly imperfect way. He looked nothing like the headlines. No suit, no entourage, just a man waiting for someone he wanted to see. When his eyes found hers, he stood with an ease that sent a warm ripple through her. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out her chair. Leela blushed. "Thanks. This place is lovely. The owner's a friend," he said as they both sat. "Maria. She used to run a tech startup. When it failed, she opened this place. I invested in her second chance." "That's incredible," Leela said softly, glancing around. "It has soul." "That's what she said she wanted it to have," he replied with a small smile. "A space where people can breathe." They ordered Kefir's, a cinnamon oat milk latte, his a black drip with a splash of cream. For a few moments, silence wrapped around them comfortably, as if neither of them needed to fill it with anything loud or clever. Then Caleb leaned in, voice gentle. "Tell me something I won't find on your resume." Leela thought for a moment, then smiled. "I used to have a pet duck named Franklin. He followed me everywhere until he decided the neighbor's pond was more glamorous." Caleb chuckled. "A duck, that's a first." "Your turn," she said. "My first job was delivering newspapers," he said. "Rain, snow, you name it. I was up at 5 every morning." She tilted her head. "Let me guess. You used a spreadsheet to map out your route for maximum efficiency?" He laughed, laughed, and Leela felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "You're not wrong," he admitted. "I even calculated how wind resistance slowed me down if I took my bike instead of walking. I was a very intense 12-year-old. Their laughter faded into a comfortable quiet. "Do you miss anything about being a kid?" she asked. Caleb stared into his coffee for a moment, My parents. Lila's smile faded with sympathy. I'm sorry. They passed away when I was 22. Car accident. It broke something in me for a while, but it also made me focus. I wanted to build something meaningful, something that wouldn't disappear overnight. She reached across the table and gently touched his hand. That must have been unimaginably hard. He looked up, and their eyes locked. It was. But it also taught me how short and fragile life can be. That's why I don't waste time with things that don't matter. Lila swallowed the lump in her throat. You don't seem like someone who wastes anything, she said. He gave a quiet nod. Except maybe sleep. I'm awful at that. They spent the next hour talking about everything, her small town upbringing, her dreams of becoming a creative director someday, his journey from garage startup to Forbes magazine. But it wasn't just facts and timelines. It was emotion, stories, vulnerability. Lila told him how she turned down job offers in New York to stay closer to her aging parents, and how she often worried she hadn't done enough. You did the right thing, Caleb said, without hesitation. There's no metric for love, no chart that tells you what sacrifice is worth. He made her feel seen in a way no one had before, like she was not just another woman in a sea of ambition, but someone valuable not despite her quiet nature, but because of it. By mid-afternoon, as the sun briefly peeked from behind the Seattle clouds, Caleb smiled at her and said, There's a small Italian place a few blocks from here. Nothing flashy, just incredible gnocchi. Want to keep this going? Layla hesitated. Her heart said yes. Her head screamed caution. But his gaze was steady, open, and free of pressure. I'd like that, she said. The restaurant was small and dimly lit. The kind of place where the tables were too close together and the air smelled like garlic and home. They sat tucked into a corner booth, a flickering candle between them, as a waitress with a thick accent brought them warm bread and red wine. They ordered shared plates and sipped slowly, still learning each other one story at a time. Then Lily asked the question that had been dancing at the edge of her mind all day. Why me? Caleb looked up from twirling a forkful of gnocchi, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, she gestured vaguely. You're Caleb Thorne. You could probably have dinner with models, or CEOs, or socialites, or, I don't know, anyone. So why are you here with me? He set down his fork. Because when I met you in that elevator, you didn't try to impress me. You didn't know who I was. You didn't see a company logo or $sig new star stranger, and you spoke to me like one, with honesty. He paused, eyes softening. In my world, most people want something from me. Access, power, a story to tell. You made me feel human, like maybe there's more to me than just my bank account or my last acquisition. Leela blinked back unexpected tears. No one's ever said anything like that to me. No one's ever listened to me like you did. Caleb replied quietly. Later that night, as he walked her back to her car parked a block away, the rain began to fall again in a soft, rhythmic whisper. He held an umbrella over both of them, his other hand gently resting at the small of her back. When they reached the car, she turned to thank him only to be met with a kiss on the cheek, delicate and warm, and then a pause, a shared breath, a lingering gaze. He leaned in and kissed her softly on the lips. No performance, no calculation, just a moment of real connection in a world that rarely slowed down long enough for it. When they pulled apart, he whispered, I'm really glad I stepped into that elevator. So am I, Leela replied, voice barely audible. And as she watched him walk away through the mist, umbrella in hand, her heart was no longer afraid. Something was beginning, and it felt like the most honest thing in the world. At the Thorne Innovations headquarters, nestled in the uppermost floors of Braddock Tower, the air always seemed to carry the scent of urgent fresh brewed espresso and ambition. But that Monday morning, something was different. Margaret Yuen, Caleb Thorne's executive assistant of 5 years, noticed it before her boss had even finished walking into his office. He was smiling. Margaret raised a carefully sculpted eyebrow from behind her tablet as Caleb loosened in the collar of his shirt and tossed his jacket casually over the back of a chair. "You seem particularly cheerful," she remarked as she pulled up his morning schedule. "Did we close a deal I wasn't informed about?" Caleb chuckled. "Not exactly." Margaret paused, sensing something deeper than the typical post-boardroom glow. She'd seen Caleb interact with dozens of powerful executives, glamorous women, and sharp-tongued investors. He was always polished, always in control. But this was different. "Anyone I should know about?" she asked, her tone light but probing. Caleb hesitated for the briefest moment before replying. "Her name is Leila Monroe. She works in marketing over at Brightedge." Margaret blinked. "She's the one you mentioned last week." From the elevator, Caleb nodded, his expression softening. "We had coffee yesterday, and dinner." Margaret tapped something into her tablet, but her eyes didn't leave his face. Her job involved many things: scheduling, screening, negotiating, but above all, it involved protecting Caleb. His success made him a magnet for opportunists. She had made it her mission to ensure no one got too close unless they earned it. But there was something in his voice, something genuine. She made a mental note to quietly look into Leila, no of suspicion, but precaution. If this woman could make Caleb Bourne laugh like that on a Monday morning, she was worth paying attention to. Back across the city, on the 15th floor of Brightedge Communications, Leila stared blankly at her computer screen, a half-finished campaign outline open and untouched. Her mind wasn't in the office. It was on the balcony of a cafe, on shared laughter over gnocchi, on the feel of Caleb's hand in hers as he walked her to her car, the way he kissed her neck possessively, but reverently, as if he was letting himself hope for something real. "Earth to Leila," called a voice from above. She blinked. Andrew Kessler, her boss, stood over her cubicle, coffee in one hand, file in the other. "The Morrison account presentation is in an hour," he said flatly. "You look like you're daydreaming." Leila jolted upright. "Sorry, I was just reviewing my slides." "Well, review faster," Andrew muttered. "The client specifically requested you after that pitch last week. Don't let the success go to your head." He walked away before she could respond. As she gathered her materials, she felt her pulse spike. The Morrison account was huge, and she couldn't afford to be distracted. But as she exhaled and reached for her notes, her phone buzzed. A text. "Caleb, thinking about you. Would you be open to dinner with my sister tomorrow night? She's been asking to meet the woman who's made me smile this much lately." Lila's breath caught. He wanted her to meet his sister. Before she could even process it, her phone buzzed again. "Nina, I'm in your building. Emergency dumpling intervention. Meet me in the lobby in 5. Leila groaned. Nina Castillo never did anything quietly. She burst into the Brightedge lobby like a whirlwind in high heels, dragging a tote bag of takeout and a gleam of determination in her eyes. "Leila Monroe," she declared, loud enough for several interns to look up. "We need to talk now." Leila practically pulled her friend into an empty conference room and closed the door. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. Nina pulled out her phone and thrust it into Lila's hands. "I did a deep dive last night," she said. "Your elevator man Caleb Thorney's worth over $2 billion. He's been on the cover of Fortune, Wired, Time. He's dated supermodels. He once invested in a space balloon startup just because he was bored." Leila sat down slowly. "I know who he is now, Nina, and I know it sounds insane, but when I'm with him, I forget all of that. He listens. He makes me feel seen. That's exactly what I'm worried about," Nina said gently, pulling up a photo of Caleb and some actress draped in diamonds. "Leila, you're brilliant and kind and wonderful, but you're also vulnerable. What if this is just a game to him, a novelty?" Lila's chest tightened. "I don't think it is," she said quietly. "I feel safe with him. Like I don't have to pretend to be someone else." Nina studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "I don't want to see you get hurt." "I know," Leila said, "but I have to take the risk, don't I?" Her phone buzzed again. She turned the screen toward Nina, showing Caleb's message. Nina's eyes widened. "He wants you to meet his sister," she whispered. "That's not a player move. That's serious." The next evening, Leela stood in front of a full-length mirror in the bathroom of Caleb's penthouse. Smoothing the fabric of a black dress Nina had practically demanded she wear. Her heart thundered in her chest. The penthouse itself was stunning floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, marble floors, and soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. But none of it felt cold or flashy. Somehow, it felt lived in, personal. Like Caleb, she stepped out into the dining area, where Caleb stood beside a poised woman with silver blonde hair and the same striking blue eyes. "Leela," Caleb said, stepping forward with a proud smile. "This is my sister, Evelyn Thorne." Evelyn extended her hand. "It's so lovely to meet you. Caleb's been impossible to shut up about you." Leela laughed nervously as they all sat down. Dinner was served by a soft-spoken chef who vanished as quickly as he came, leaving the three of them to clink wine glasses over a meal of roasted sea bass, truffle risotto, and lemon tart. Leela expected awkwardness. Instead, she found warmth. Evelyn told stories of Caleb's childhood, how he once tried to program the thermostat to only activate on Fibonacci-numbered days, or how he'd build a homemade drone that ended up in their neighbor's pool. Caleb groaned as Leela laughed so hard her eyes teared up. "She's perfect for you," Evelyn whispered to her brother when Leela stepped away to the restroom. "I know," Caleb replied softly. "I think I'm falling in love with her." After dinner, Caleb led Leela out onto the balcony. The sky above Seattle was clear for once, stars glimmering beyond the city lights. The Space Needle rose in the distance like a sentinel. "Thank you for tonight," Leela said. "Your sister is amazing. She loved you," Caleb said. "I knew she would." There was a long pause as he looked at her. "Leela," he said, taking her hands gently in his. "I know our worlds are different, and I know this is all happening fast, but what I feel for you is real." Her heart swelled, throat tightening. "Caleb," she whispered, "you make me feel like I'm more than I thought I could be, like I'm worth believing in." "You are," he said firmly. "You're the most genuine, intelligent, beautiful woman I've ever met." And then he kissed her again, slow and deep under the canopy of stars and city lights, and Leela felt like her feet were no longer touching the earth. In his arms, she didn't feel like a marketing coordinator from a quiet Oregon town. She felt like herself finally, completely, fearlessly seen. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of Caleb Thorne's penthouse, bouncing softly off marble countertops and polished wood floors. The morning had the kind of golden hue that made everything seem like a dream meant for Leela Monroe. That's exactly what it felt like. She padded into the kitchen wearing one of Caleb's oversized t-shirts, her bare feet silent against the floor. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes wafted through the air, warm and sweet. There, in front of the stove, was Caleb rumpled, wearing a flour-dusted sweater and pajama pants, flipping pancakes with the care of a Michelin chef. He turned when he heard her, his face lighting up. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, leaning over to kiss her gently. Leela laughed, tucking her hair behind her ear. "This feels like a dream." "Then let's never wake up," Caleb replied, spinning her once around the kitchen, laughter chasing them in circles. It had been 3 months since that fateful elevator read 3 months of late-night dinners, coffee-fueled brainstorming, slow dances in the living room, and whispered secrets between shared sheets. Leela had never felt more seen, more heard, more herself, and surprisingly, the more time she spent in Caleb's world, the more it began to feel like home. His wealth wasn't intimidating when she saw how he remembered how she liked her coffee. His success wasn't overwhelming when he asked her opinion on his company's ad campaigns like it truly mattered. She was still Lilashy, creative, thoughtful, but now she was also brave. Later that morning, as they sat side by side in Caleb's sun-drenched home office, Leela leaned over a proposal draft for the Thorne Foundation's new community tech initiative. "I still think the campaign needs a stronger focus on storytelling," she said, tracing a line on the page with her finger. "People don't engage with data, they connect with people." Caleb watched her, captivated not by the proposal, but by the way her brow furrowed in thought. The passion in her voice, the sparkle in her eyes when she defended her ideas. "You're incredible, you know that," he said, almost to himself. Leela looked up, blushing. "You're biased." "I'm not," he said, placing a hand over hers. "You're exactly the kind of mind I want helping shape the future of this company." Before she could respond, Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Margaret." He picked up. "Caleb, I'm sorry to interrupt your weekend." Margaret's voice came through, clipped and tense. "But we have a situation. It's the Morrison building." Leela froze. That building was the very place they'd met. The elevator, the presentation, the beginning of everything. "What kind of situation?" Caleb asked, switching the call to speaker. "There's a competing bid," Margaret said. "If we want the building for the new Thorn headquarters, we need to act. The owner wants to meet in an hour for a final decision." Caleb sighed. "Today." "Yes." He looked at Leela apologetically. "We had plans." "I'm sorry." She waved it off, though she couldn't entirely mask the flicker of disappointment. "It's okay. Business comes first." He studied her for a second, then stood suddenly. "Come with me." She blinked. "What?" He smiled. "That building brought us together. You should be there when we hopefully make it ours." As the car pulled up to the Morrison building, Leela felt a strange rush of nostalgia. So much had changed since that rainy morning, when she clutched her portfolio to her chest and stumbled through a conversation with a stranger. And yet, walking through those same lobby doors beside him now, her hand clasped in his, it felt like a perfect full circle. They rode the elevator together, just the two of them. "Déjà vu," Caleb asked, brushing his fingers against hers. "A little," she said with a smile. "Only this time, I'm not terrified." As they neared the 15th floor, she noticed something odd. Caleb kept checking his watch, running his fingers through his hair, fidgeting in a way she had never seen before. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "I just want everything to go perfectly." When the doors opened, Leela stepped out and froze. The 15th floor wasn't set up for a meeting. It wasn't full of real estate agents or competing bidders. It was empty. No, not empty, transformed. Hundreds of white roses lined the walls and spilled across the floor in delicate arches. Soft lighting glowed from hidden fixtures, casting the room in gentle amber. Framed photos of their journey coffee dates, long walks, stolen glance lined the walls like a love story unfolding in still images. A string quartet played softly in the corner, the same song that had played during their first dance at Evelyn's birthday party. "Caleb," Leela whispered, her heart already pounding. "What is this?" He took her hand, guiding her to the center of the room. "Leela," he began, his voice slightly shaky. "3 months ago, I stepped into an elevator expecting just another normal day. I never imagined I'd meet someone who would change my entire world." Her eyes filled with tears. "You saw me as a billionaire, not as a tech CEO, not as some powerful figure in the industry. You saw me as a man, just a man who was nervous for a presentation, who wanted someone to talk to, someone real." He took a breath. "You've made me a better person. You've shown me that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. You've taught me that love is not about status or spectacle, it's about truth and trust and all the small, everyday moments that make a life together." He lowered to one knee and pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a diamond ring, elegant, modest, and beautifully simple, exactly like her. "Leela Monroe," he said, eyes locked with hers. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me that's measured not in dollars or headlines, but in laughter and quiet mornings and unshakable love?" Leela was crying now, hands shaking as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Then again, louder, firmer. "Yes, of course, eyes." Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger, and just as he stood to kiss her, the elevator dinged again. Out stepped Evelyn, Margaret, Nina, and a small group of friends, and familial clapping, cheering, crying. "She said yes," Caleb called out, sweeping Leela into his arms and spinning her round. The room erupted with joy, champagne uncorked, music soaring, and Lila's heart soaring even higher. Later, as she stood with Nina by the window, admiring the ring sparkling under the city lights. Lila whispered, "You were right to worry, you know?" Nina looked at her, confused. "About what?" "About getting hurt," Lila said. "Only, I didn't know love could feel like this. I didn't know it could be this good." Nina hugged her tight. "You deserve every second of it." Nearby, Caleb was deep in conversation with Evelyn and Margaret, smiling in that soft, open way Lila had come to adore. He looked over, caught her eye, and mouthed, "I love you." And in that moment, surrounded by roses and string music, laughter and light, Lila knew one truth. This wasn't just the end of one chapter. It was the beginning of everything. The morning after the proposal, Lila woke up in Caleb's penthouse, the soft gray light of dawn spilling across the plush duvet. For a moment, she simply lay there, eyes half closed, a quiet smile curling her lips. And then she saw a diamond ring on her finger, glittering faintly in the early light like a secret whisper to the sun. It hadn't been a dream. She sat up slowly, wrapping herself in one of Caleb's sweaters, still faintly smelling of cedar and coffee. The living room was silent, except for the low hum of the city below. Then her phone buzzed. 17 new notifications. She frowned, then picked it up and froze. Her name was trending. Engaged to a billionaire, Caleb Thorne, and his mystery fiancé revealed. Marketing assistant wins tech tycoon's heart, a real-life Cinderella story. Lila scrolled through headlines, photos, and grainy zoom lens shots from the proposal the night before. Someone must have tipped off the press, or maybe one of the building staff had leaked it. Either way, the news had spread like wildfire. "Morning," Caleb said behind her, voice raspy with sleep as he came into the room, his arms wrapped around her waist, and he kissed the top of her head. "You're up early." She turned to him, phone still in hand. "We're everywhere." He peered over her shoulder and sighed. "I was hoping we'd have at least one day before the circus started." Lila sat down on the couch, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to do this, Caleb. I'm not used to being seen." He crouched in front of her, resting his hands on her knees. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself. The media will say what they want. Let them. All that matters is us." "But what if they dig into my past?" she whispered. "Or my family, or make fun of where I come from? Then they'll see a woman with a beautiful heart, an incredible mind, and the kind of strength most people dream of." He said without hesitation. "You don't have to prove anything to them." She took a shaky breath, leaning into his touch. "I'm just scared. What if I mess this up?" "You won't," Caleb said gently. "You couldn't, even if you tried." Later that day, Margaret arrived, tablet in hand and an expression somewhere between focused and sympathetic. "I've taken down the more invasive articles," she said briskly. "But once this kind of news hits, it spreads. We'll need a formal statement and a few pre-approved interviews to manage the narrative." Lila looked overwhelmed again. "Interviews? We can keep them brief," Margaret assured her. "Just enough to get your voice out there, so people don't fill in the blanks themselves." To her surprise, it was Evelyn who reached out the afternoon with a handwritten note in a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate pearl bracelet. "Our mothers," the note read. "She wore it when she got engaged. I want you to have it." Lila's hands trembled as she clasped it around her wrist. The world might have been watching, but in this moment, she felt loved, not just by Caleb, but by his family. In the weeks that followed, their lives changed overnight. Lila couldn't walk down the street without catching a stranger snapping photos. Paparazzi camped outside Caleb's building. Articles dissected her wardrobe, her education, her choice in shoes. Her LinkedIn inbox exploded with networking requests from people she hadn't spoken to since high school. But the hardest part wasn't the attention, it was the assumptions. Some headlines reduced her to the girl who got lucky. Others suggested she was chasing money, that she had played some long game to trap a billionaire. The words stung, even though she knew they weren't true. Caleb never let her face it alone. Every time she broke down, once in the middle of a grocery aisle, once in the back of a car, once in their shared kitchen, was there, holding her, reminding her who she was. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for your joy," he told her one night. "You've worked for everything, and I'm the lucky one, not you." When they began planning the wedding, Leela surprised everyone. "I want it small," she told Caleb. "Simple, intimate, just family and close friends. But we could fly everyone to Tuscany," he teased gently. "Private villas, vineyard vows." She laughed. "Tempting, but I want something that feels like us, not like a photo spread for a luxury magazine." He kissed her hand. "Then that's what we'll do." Evelyn helped her pick a venue, a charming seaside chapel overlooking Puget Sound. Margaret handled press logistics, shielding Leela from the worst of the media storm. And Nina, as expected, took over as maid of honor and part-time bodyguard. As they tasted cake samples and debated first dance songs, Leela found herself changing in ways she hadn't expected. She was no longer shrinking from attention but choosing when to step into it. She wasn't intimidated by powerful people, but speaking confidently in rooms she once felt invisible in. Caleb hadn't just loved her. He'd believed in her, and that belief had planted something inside her that was now in full bloom. One night, weeks before the ceremony, Leela lay beside Caleb beneath a canopy of string lights on their balcony. The city sparkled below them. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Letting me into this part of your life?" He turned to her, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Leela, I've had every kind of success a man can dream of, but I didn't know real happiness until I met you." She exhaled, tears pricking her eyes. "I just don't want to lose myself in all of this." "You won't," he whispered, "because you know exactly who you are, and so do I." He pulled her into his arms, her head resting against his chest. No headlines, no photos, no noise, just the woman who had dared to open her heart, and the man who had found peace in her quiet strength. A soft breeze carried the scent of salt and wildflowers through the open windows of the bridal suite, and Leela Monroe stood at the center of it all, still and quiet, as the world buzzed around her. The chapel overlooking Puget Sound was decorated in white roses and eucalyptus, the all lined with candles flickering in the late afternoon light. It was intimate, just as she had wanted. Only 70 guests, a perfect blend of Caleb's closest business allies and Leela's dearest family and friends. In front of the full-length mirror, Leela hardly recognized herself. She wore a simple, elegant gown of soft ivory silk, its neckline delicate, the hem brushing the floor like a sigh. Her mother's pearl necklace rested above her heart, a borrowed diamond pin from Evelyn nestled in her hair. Her shoes were old, her bracelet was new, and the blue came from the tiny forget-me-not embroidered into the lining of her dress by Nina's clever hands. "You look like a painting," Nina said, adjusting Leela's veil with trembling fingers. "I mean, if paintings could breathe." Leela laughed, her voice shaky. "I feel like I might float away." "That's love," Nina whispered, her eyes misty, "and maybe a little pre-wedding adrenaline." From the window, Leela could see the guests beginning to arrive. Caleb's business partners in crisp suits, her parents holding hands in quieter, her college friends hugging each other with excitement. And somewhere in that crowd, the man who had changed everything, the man she was about to marry. In the chapel, Caleb Thorne stood at the altar, hands clasped in front of him. For a man who regularly negotiated billion-dollar deals and commanded rooms full of global investors, he looked completely and utterly undone. "Breathe," murmured Evelyn beside him. She was his best woman. No one else even came close. "She'll be here any moment. I don't want to blink," he whispered. "I don't want to miss it." The musicians began to play a soft arrangement of the same song that had played during their first dance at Evelyn's birthday party, and every head turned as Leela stepped into the doorway. The moment Caleb saw her, everything else fell away. She wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant, a vision of everything he had never known he was missing. Tears welled in his eyes as she walked slowly down the aisle, her father holding her hand tightly before placing it into Caleb's with quiet reverence. "Take care of her," he whispered. "Always," Caleb replied. The ceremony was short but deeply personal. Thomas Everett, a longtime family friend of the Thornes, and a retired minister, officiated with warmth and wisdom. Marriage, he said, is not built on fireworks or grand gestures. It's built on small kindnesses, on laughter in the kitchen, on showing you over and over again. And it is, above all else, a choice. Every day, you choose to love. Lila and Caleb turned to face each other, hands trembling as they held one another's. I wrote these for you, Lila said, voice steady despite the tears already on her cheeks. Caleb, she began, when I stepped into that elevator, I was terrified. I was a girl trying to survive in a city that felt too big, too fast, too far from everything I'd ever known. And then you looked at me like I wasn't invisible. You heard me, you believed in me, and because of that, I learned to believe in myself. Her voice broke for a moment, but she continued. I promise to never forget where we started. I promise to listen, to challenge, to trust, and to grow. I promise to build a life with you that isn't built on wealth or status, but on kindness, honesty, and all the quiet moments in between. Caleb wiped his eyes before he spoke. Lila, he said, voice thick with emotion. Before I met you, I thought I had everything, but I didn't know what it meant to be seen, to be known. You are my calm in the chaos, my honesty in a world full of noise. I promise to protect your dreams like they're my own. I promise to honor your voice, your heart, and your strength. And I promise that no matter what the world says about us, the only truth that matters will be the one we live together. There wasn't a dry in the chapel when Thomas smiled and said, with the power vested in me by the state of Washington, and with the love in this room, that I don't need any legal license to freely now pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb kissed her like she was the beginning of something sacred, and as they walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, as Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, Lila's mind flashed back to the shy girl she once was, alone, anxious, clutching a leather portfolio, an elevator. That girl was gone, and in her place stood a woman who had chosen love over fear, who had stepped out of the shadows into a world of light. The reception was held in the open courtyard of the chapel, under a canopy of twinkle lights. Long wooden tables were decorated with wild flowers, flickering candles, and hand-lettered name cards. The music was soft, the food homemade, and the champagne endless. But the real magic came in the in-between moments. In Nina's emotional toast that included a tearful I knew you were someone extraordinary before he did. In Evelyn pulling Lila into a hug and whispering, you're my sister now, forever. In Caleb twirling her in the middle of the dance floor as their song played once more. This time surrounded by everyone who mattered. Any regrets? He whispered in her ear. She smiled, resting her head against his chest. Only that it took an elevator to bring us together. He laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. Then here's to broken elevators and unexpected beginnings. They danced under the stars, surrounded by love, laughter, and the quiet certainty that the best chapters of their story were still waiting to be written. Mornings in the Thorne penthouse were no longer quiet, not because of chaos, but because of laughter, the soft kind that came in whispers over coffee, the kind that slipped through the steam rising from the French press, or across the kitchen island while one read headlines and the other danced barefoot to a jazz playlist. 3 months had passed since Lila Monroe had become Lila Thorne, and though her last name had changed, her essence had not. If anything, the woman who once second-guessed every step now walked with purpose in it only in Caleb's world, but in her own. The first days after the wedding were filled with recovery-long naps, late brunches, spontaneous getaways. But once the champagne haze lifted, Lila felt something stir inside her. Ambition, not for attention, or approval, or wealth, but for impact. I've been thinking, she said one morning as she folded her laptop shut. What if I started my own consulting firm? Caleb, seated across from her in a hoodie and glasses, his cereal forgotten, looked up with genuine curiosity. Tell me more. I mean, I've worked on enough campaigns to know where small businesses get overlooked. They don't have the budgets for big agencies, but they have ideas, stories, heart. What if I help them find their voice, build strategies tailored to them, not corporations? Caleb's eyes lit up, Leela, that's brilliant. She laughed nervously. It's risky. He reached across the table. So was marrying me. That made her smile. But seriously, he said, you've got the insight, the instincts, and the empathy. Most people overlook authenticity. You lead with it. That night, as they lay in bed, Leela stared at the ceiling and whispered, what if I fail? Caleb pulled her closer. Then we try again, together. The next week, she filed the paperwork. Leela Thorne Consulting was born in a sunny spare room in their home that she transformed into a workspace, walls filled with sketches, a whiteboard scribbled with ideas, and a candle that smelled like cedar and resolve. Her first client came through a connection from Nina, a small bookstore chain trying to compete with digital giants. Leela sat with the owner for hours, asking about childhood memories, favorite stories, the reason behind the business. She designed a campaign around nostalgia editing as a return home, a thread connecting generations. It went viral in local circles, drawing national attention to the tiny business. By month 2, she had 5 more clients, a bakery, a sustainable clothing line, a nonprofit for rat rescues. Each project lit her up in a different way. She felt alive again because she was Caleb Thorne's wife, but because she was Leela Monroe, strategist, creator, builder. And Caleb, he was her biggest fan. He'd peek into her office, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with lunch, always with pride in his eyes. Sometimes he offered ideas. Most times, he just listened. But balancing love and legacy wasn't always easy. One Thursday afternoon, Leela came home to find Caleb in the kitchen, frustration written all over his face. Board meeting ran late. He muttered, then the investors backed out of our satellite partnership. And now, the R&D team wants to restructure their entire timeline. She placed her bag down, walked over, and gently cupped his face. Hi, she whispered. He closed his eyes, leaning into her hand. Hi, no CEO talk, she said. Just you and me. Dinner on the balcony. He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders like water draining from a tub. Perfect. They ate takeout by candlelight, listening to the waves crash below. He told her about the missed deal. She told him about a pitch that didn't land. And in the space between their stories, they found grace. This was what marriage was. Leela realized that not just the grand gestures, but the ordinary moments where one person says, I see you, and the other says, I still choose you. The media, of course, had not forgotten them. Articles now painted Leela as a rising force in modern branding. Some called her the marketing whisperer. Others leaned on the narrative of the girl from nowhere who had married into everything. At first, she bristled, but one afternoon, Caleb handed her a printed headline that read, From Elevator to Empire, How Leela Thorne is Changing the Game for Small Business. He had framed it, You're building something that matters, he said. They're finally seeing what I saw in you on day 1. She kissed him, tears in her eyes. I just want to stay grounded. Then let's build roots, he said, deep ones. Their routine settled into something beautiful. Morning coffees on the balcony, work in separate corners of the penthouse, midday texts filled with encouragement, evenings spent curled up on the couch, phones down, hands linked, music low. They still argued about schedules, about silence, about the dishwasher, but every disagreement ended in understanding, in apologies, in renewed commitment to keep learning one another. One Saturday morning, as Leela flipped pancakes and Caleb leaned on the counter reading proposals, he looked up and said, What do you think about taking a break? Just us. A week somewhere quiet. She turned, surprised. You, unplug. He laughed. Shocking, I know. But I love it, she said. Let's go. They booked a secluded cabin on the Oregon coast, just like the places Leela remembered from childhood. No Wi-Fi, no press, no deadlines, just wind in the trees, salt in the air, and to people who had fought to find each other and were now choosing deliberately. Day Tuesday. One night, as they sat by the fireplace, Caleb wrapped his arm around her. You ever think about what might have happened if we'd never shared the elevator? She smiled. I probably would have had a panic attack, bummed my presentation, quit within the week. He kissed her temple. I would have gone back to work thinking I'd missed something, and I would have been right. Leela looked at him then, the flames flickering in his eyes. We were supposed to meet, she said. Yes, he whispered. And this is the life we're supposed to build. The email subject line read, Keynote Invitation, National Women in Business Summit Seattle Chapter. Leela stared at it for a full minute before daring to open it. Dear Mrs. Thorne, we are thrilled to invite you to be a keynote speaker at this year's Women in Business Summit, representing rising voices in marketing and entrepreneurship. Your work empowering small businesses has inspired us all. We believe your story matters. She read the message twice, then a third time. Caleb walked into the kitchen a moment later, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Morning, love. You okay? She turned the screen toward him. His eyes scanned the message. A slow, proud smile grew on his face. You're going to be incredible. Leela bit her bottom lip. I haven't said yes. He blinked. Why not? She looked away. Because I'm not sure I belong on that stage. I mean, the other speakers are CEOs, authors, economists. I'm changing lives. He finished gently. You're changing how people run their businesses. You're giving them hope. She sighed. What if they only want me because I'm your wife? Caleb stepped closer, his voice steady and clear. Leela, if this summit wanted a Thorne name, they'd ask me, but they asked you. Her eyes filled. I just don't want to feel like I'm borrowing your light. He wrapped his arms around her and whispered, You're not borrowing anything. You carry your own light. I just get to witness it. In the days that followed, Leela accepted the invitation, but she battled waves of self-doubt beneath the surface. Nina helped her write the opening lines of the speech. Evelyn arranged a styling session. Margaret helped field media requests. But even surrounded by support, Leela couldn't shake the fear of being found out, that she was too soft-spoken, too unpolished, too ordinary to be standing in front of hundreds of ambitious women who had conquered glass ceilings without marrying into power. 2 nights before the event, as she paced the living room rehearsing, Caleb watched from the couch, quiet. She stumbled over a sentence and groaned. This is a mistake. No, it's not, he said gently. I'm not built for this kind of attention. He stood, walked over, and placed his hands on her shoulders. Do you remember what you said to me that night on the balcony? He asked. When you told me I made you feel like you were worth believing in? She nodded. Well, now it's your turn, he said. Believe in yourself. Because I do. Completely. The morning of the summit arrived, with soft clouds and a quiet city. Leela stepped onto the stage in a tailored navy dress, her heart hammering in her chest. A sea of faces stared up at her executives, small business owners, students with notebooks in hand. She adjusted the mic, looked at her notes, then looked up. I used to believe the only way to be seen was to be loud, she began. But I've learned that sometimes strength shows up in quiet forms, in the way you listen, in the way you lift others, in the way you choose kindness, even when the world rewards aggression. She spoke about her small-town roots, about the fear of not being enough, about creating a company rooted in human connection, not market dominance. She didn't mention Caleb until the very end. I married a man who believes in me, but even more important, I've learned to believe in myself. And I've discovered that the truest kind of success isn't defined by who stands behind you, but by the lives you reach along the way. When she stepped off stage to a standing ovation, her legs nearly buckled. Caleb, waiting near the wing, eyes glassy, pride radiating from every inch of him. He took her hand, kissed her forehead. You were the best thing I've heard in years, he whispered. Not just because I love you, but because it was real. But of course, not everyone responded kindly. The next day, a tech media outlet ran the piece titled, Golden Girl or PR Move? Leela Thorne's Rapid Rise Sparks Debate. The article questioned whether Caleb had used his influence to position her for the summit, whether Leela's business had grown organically or been Thorne-fueled. Leela stared at the screen, numb. I knew this would happen, she said softly. Caleb closed the laptop with a quiet firmness. They don't get to define your work, he said. They don't know the long nights, the anxiety, the hours you've poured into clients who can't afford what you're worth, but need your help. I hate that they make it sound like I don't deserve this. He pulled her close. They're wrong, but even if they weren't, you think I could orchestrate the way people cry after hearing you speak, the way clients thank you like you've saved them. That's not press, that's impact. Later that night, Evelyn texted a photo. It was of a coffee shop in Denver with a handwritten sign taped to the window. Our marketing angel, Leila Thorne. We're still open because of her. Leila stared at it until the tears came. She didn't need the approval of critics. She had proof in real people, real stories, real hearts touched. That weekend, as they strolled hand in hand through Pike Place Market, Leila paused by a street musician playing a hauntingly beautiful violin piece. Caleb looked over. You okay? She nodded. I think I am. Still worried about the press? She shook her head. No, I just keep thinking. I didn't set out to be inspirational. I just wanted to help people. You did, he said. And now you're helping more than you ever imagined. She turned to him, fingers lacing tighter around his. You know, that elevator changed everything. He smiled. Yes, it did. But what really changed me, she added softly, was someone believing in me before I believed in myself. He stopped right in the middle of the market and kissed her gently, reverently, like they were back at square one. You had the strength all along, Leela. I just had the privilege of seeing it first. The Morrison building hadn't changed. It still stood tall in downtown Seattle, glass shimmering under a pale gray sky, as if watching over the city with quiet permanence. Inside, the same elevator still rose with a soft chime, its mirror walls pristine, its buttons glowing gently. But Leela Thorne, formerly Leela Monroe, had changed, dressed in a sleek but simple cream blouse, a leather notebook in one hand, and her shoulders back with quiet confidence. She stepped into the lobby with a small smile. The echoes of the past whispered round her. This building was where it had all started. She'd been 26, anxious, overwhelmed, just trying to survive the day, clutching a presentation like a lifeline. And then a stranger had stepped into the elevator, charming, calm, and Noah Blend. Everything had begun. Now, 7 years later, she wasn't here for herself. She was here for someone else. On the 15th floor, renovated, rebranded, and now one of the headquarters for the Thorne Foundation. Leela walked into a quiet meeting room where a young woman sat nervously flipping through a binder. The girl stood as Leela entered, her eyes wide with awe. Mrs. Thorne, she said quickly, I'm so honored. Thank you for taking time to meet with me. Leela smiled gently. It's Leela, and I'm glad you're here. Kali Lopez was a recent graduate from a scholarship program Leela had helped fund, and the founder of a community-focused food startup aimed at reducing waste and feeding low-income families. She reminded Leela of herself, humble, hopeful, and a little afraid to take up space. They sat down, and Kali launched into her pitch, voice trembling at first, but gaining strength as she spoke about mission and values, social impact, and a prototype app she'd been developing with friends. Leela listened without interrupting, just as Caleb had once listened to her. When Kali finished, she looked away, cheeks flushed. I know it's a lot. I don't have the polish or the connections, but I really believe this could help people. Leila leaned forward. Kali, I don't care about polish. I care about purpose. And your heart is exactly what this world needs more of. Kali blinked back tears. You really think so? I do, Leela said. You remind me of someone I used to be, scared to be seen, but quietly carrying more strength than anyone realized. Kali laughed softly. Is that how you got started? In this building? Leela looked around, her eyes warming. Yes, right there, in that elevator. That evening, Leela returned home just as Caleb was finishing up a call in their shared office. Their home was quieter now. The days of launch parties and investor dinners had softened into long walks, quiet dinners, and deeper roots. Caleb closed his laptop and looked up as she entered. Hey, he said, How was the meeting? She leaned against the doorframe, smiling. Incredible. She reminded me of me. Caleb stood and walked over, wrapping his arms round her waist. She's lucky to have you in her corner. Leela pressed her forehead against his. Do you ever think about that day in the elevator? He asked, smiling. Every time I walk into that building, it was the best wrong turn I ever made. You weren't even supposed to be on that floor. I know. Margaret had sent me the wrong schedule. She still insists it wasn't her fault. They both laughed. Sometimes, Leela whispered, I still can't believe it all happened. That I get to do what I love. That I get to come home to you. Caleb brushed her hair back. You don't have to believe it. You built it. We did. Together. Later that night, as they sat on the balcony with tea and a blanket wrapped around their legs, the city lights twinkled below like distant stars. I've been thinking, Caleb said, we should take a break soon. Somewhere coastal, quiet, like we did that first year. Leela grinned. You mean before your board tried to call you 10 times a day? He shrugged. They still do. But now, I know when to turn the phone off. She leaned into him. I love that. He rested his chin on her head. Leela, he said, I want you to know something. I didn't just fall in love with you in that elevator. I fall in love with you every time I see you lift someone up. Every time you chase a new idea. Every time you speak with heart, not ego. I feel the same, she whispered. You've never made me feel small. You've never tried to quiet me. Even when I doubted myself, you stayed steady. He kissed the top of her head. That's what love is. A week later, Leela received a letter in the mail-in old-fashioned envelope, handwritten in looping cursive. Inside was a note from the owner of the Morrison building, now in his late 80s. Dear Mrs. Thorne, I remember the day you first walked into my building. You were terrified, if I may be honest, and I've watched from a distance quickly, probably as you turned that fear into something fearless. Thank you for honoring this space with your beginning. The 15th floor is now known as the Thorne Room. You and your husband built something rare, not just wealth, but warmth. Leela read it twice, and then she cried. Years later, when people asked her how it all began, she never gave them the full story. Not because she didn't remember every detail bit, because some things were too sacred to reduce to headlines. But if pressed, she'd always smile and say, it started in an elevator, but the real story began when I stopped hiding, when I let someone see me and let myself be seen. And that, she believed, was the beginning of everything that truly mattered. Not money, not fame, not success, but love, courage, and the willingness to believe that ordinary moments can change everything.